Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And welcome to today's CC-Webinar.Live Keynote and Panel discussion session. And thank you for joining. We would also like to thank Bankai Group for sponsoring today's CC-Webinar.Live session. Now, I would like to pass on the microphone to Eric to introduce the keynote speaker and later on to moderate the session. For audience, if you have any questions, please do use the chat box option throughout this panel. And that's all from my side. Eric, over to you.
Thank you so much, Laura, and I'm delighted on behalf of the CARE community to have keynote speaker Aayush and Chandra here with me from our sponsor, the Bankai Group. Today we're going to discuss about how do operators face the threat of fraud in the wholesale business and industry, and we know all what that means. So we will start the session with a keynote presentation from first Aayush, and which will be taken over by Chandra and from Bankai, and afterwards we're going to bridge this into the interactive panel. So before Aayush, I give you the floor, I would like to give you a quick minute and all the other panelists to introduce themselves quickly. So Aayush, over to you.
Thank you, CARE community. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Laura, for bringing all of us together here today to discuss this ever hot topic that we have in the industry. We all belong to for a number of years, which is the threat of fraud in the wholesale business. I put it in very simple ways. It's like virus and antivirus, which we've been dealing with our computers. So every time there's a new antivirus, there's an updated version of a virus coming across. So you got to keep yourself updated. You've got to be ahead of times, and that is how it is taken. I'm Aayush, Chief Commercial Officer at Bankai Group, and along with me is my colleague Chanderhas Rana, who's head of international business development. And we've spent a number of years, in this industry. I've been in the industry for the last 17 years. And of course, Chandra has been there for about 15 or 16 years as well. So I've spent most of my life doing international voice, SMS, fraud management, revenue assurance, and billing and switching solutions. So this is, one topic which goes on and on in everyday business dealings and talks, discussing with anybody and everybody. Today, I'll give you a brief background very quickly about the company, which is Bankai. Understanding a few telecom frauds, based on our analysis today in the voice industry and dealing with multiple operators across the globe. Creating a winning fraud strategy for wholesale carriers, for operators, and future of fraud management will be covered by my colleague Chandra. And then we could have quick question answer round as well. We've been in the industry for over 30 years now. Since 1989, Bankai has been in the business. We've grown from being, a domestic India-based, push-button telephone manufacturer in 1989 to today being one of the leading carriers, having over 11 billion minutes on our network today, having our own retail network in the United States and Canada, to being one of the leading fintech solution provider company with over 60 deployments across the globe, and revenue assurance fraud management, which is one of our key topics today. That also has been one of our ACE solutions across Africa especially. I personally spent a lot of time in Africa in the last 4 or 5 years, traveling across countries, meeting operators, discussing with them, the issues that they are facing and how to cover them up. And last but not the least, we have also ventured out 4 years back into factoring business for the accounts receivable into the telcos, not just limited to voice, but to the tower business, which is again very huge and vast. So this is our profile as a group. We've also vertically expanded into beekeeping and honey business as well in the last 2 years. So it's a vast group, over $1 billion in revenue. We headquartered in New York. So that's about the company very quickly. I've covered most of these points. Now we'll straight jump to the topic, which is understanding the telecom fraud. Firstly, corporate fraud, when the word comes in, of course, it is a negative word. It is in most operators which I have personally dealt with, fraud is taken as, a cost of doing business these days. People like Beddex in the earlier years, people have started accounting fraud as a cost of doing business in their annual budgeting and planning every year. So that makes it a little easier for the fraudsters to get through different kinds of leakages in the system. Overall, as per our analysis, in 2018, we saw about $28.1 billion of worth of fraud happening in the industry. Overall, if you see 1 to 2% drop in the annual revenues also has affected the operators. 2/3 of frauds are normally tied to international voice. Amongst all the different kinds of frauds that are happening, international voice plays a big role. But operators in the last 2 years definitely have started taking the fraud seriously. But before that, they did not take it very closely, because for a mobile operator in any country, the domestic business is normally 80 to 90% of their revenues, and 10 to 15% or even lower sometimes is their international business. So as I said, they considered it as a cost of doing business kind of a thing if they lose some percentage out of this revenue. But carriers are worst affected in the due to the frauds in the recent past. So it is important, most of the fraud systems or management systems or solutions or softwares that carriers and operators are using are normally reactive. We need some kind of combination of proactive and reactive, monitored by manual intervention at all times, because the generic frauds will definitely be covered by the systems. You need to keep that system updated, but there are a lot of manual efforts in terms of making sure which kind of carrier are you dealing, what companies are you dealing, a lot of due diligence. All those things, I think, on the operator side has been missing a lot. Very quickly, as I said, telecom fraud perceived as doing cost of business. Fraud is moving, very fast, but the operators' adaptation is not that quick in terms of, how to create an anti-fraud kind of a rule or anti-fraud kind of a system. Again, installing a system in medium to big size of mobile operators takes a long period of time due to multiple channels of hierarchy and different kinds of rules or regulations they need to follow, especially the government operators, and that somewhere is affecting the carriers as well. Ineffective blacklisting, this is something which lot of now, since GLF has been formed and other communities are being formed, it is slowly coming together, but lack of cross-border jurisdiction and cooperation, sharing of information across one governance is not available today across our telecom industry. As I said, GLF is doing a great job, trying to bring all of us together and trying to see how we can cooperate. But yet this is something which is of high importance that we should, be looking at. And fraudster or the frauds hit us 24/7. It's not just at a particular time, and off business hours, festivals, all those times are when it hits the most to the operators. And as I said, it comes back to the carriers in the reverse direction. From here on, I think my colleague Chandar will take over to take you to the last 2 or 3 slides that we have and explain you how we could fight or combat with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aayush and Chander. Please, the floor is yours, and take it away and finish it off. Thank you. You're still on mute, Chander.
Chander, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Thank you, Aayush, for building the case for fraud. Yes, we have history to help the operators, be it from early days of interconnect billing. Now, since last 5-7 years, we are proud to have one of the most comprehensive fraud management solution in the industry. So, okay, when you talk about typical fraud management solution, there are 2-3 prerequisites for that particular solution. One is you need to catch fraud in near real time. Yeah, in older days, like 5-7 years back, when we used to talk about fraud management solution, it used to be more over CDR based or CDR analysis kind of stuff we used to do, and most of the solutions were reactive rather than proactive. Now, what operators and what our solution we are doing is we have every kind of approach. Like one side we have CDR profiling base, then we have test call generator in between, and then with your mediation you set up those patterns, you do all those rule management and everything within solution. So end-to-end management is very important, and with dynamic KPIs, ever evolving rule-based machine learning formulas, we have created one of the most near to perfect fraud management solution that is helping many operators and even many platform companies globally. Next slide. Yeah. So see, apart from all those scenarios that I mentioned, that be it on CDR based, be it on test call generator side, be it on rule management side, your solution should cover most kind of frauds happening in industry. Like Aayush mentioned that the overall size of industry is somewhere around 28 billion. When you talk about only international, that comprises somewhere around 60 to 65%. But within that, if you see IRSF is somewhere around 5 to 7 billion US dollar. Then Simbox is somewhere around 3 to 5 billion dollar. So your fraud-based solution should cover all kind of frauds. And when you talk about different kind of frauds, apart from IRSF, Simbox is there, TRS is there, Wangiri, we call it miscall fraud as well, then roaming fraud and PBX. So we cover almost all kind of fraud along with voice. Then on SMS side also, like our fraud solution is covering all the identity fraud to SIM farming to smashing to spamming to every kind of fraud. And then how do we do that? Then there are different kind of rules and alerts we have in our engines placed. So you can see all that smart patterns rules, complex filter configuration is there, module based access we give to the customers. So that way that our solution kind of covers all kind of fraud scenarios with all the real time all the real time and
I think we lost Chander.
I think we lost Chander. Is there any way, Aayush, that you can
of course.
move on, please? Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Chander, are you there or? Okay. So yeah, he's very well explained. How we've encompassed fighting the fraud through our current solution, which is covering up to date market based frauds that are possible. Chander, you back?
Yeah, I'm back. There was just a small flip. Yeah, sorry guys. Yeah, so thanks Aayush for covering it up. Now coming to the fraud management solution for product portfolio, I have already covered most like what our fraud solution is comprises of. Like it is rule-based analytics is the part of it. Then with evolution of artificial intelligence and machine learning patterns in it, we are kind of foreseeing what is going to be the fraud structures coming in next 3 to 5 years. So if you see our whole fraud management solution, it is covering the mediation, it is covering all the analytics, it is covering even real-time fraud happening at signaling level. And with test call generator, we are protecting, we have that many relations across the globe from where we can generate the calls for to kind of analyze the test international calls patterns and everything. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So what would be the future of fraud management? See, as Aayush at the start mentioned that it's kind of virus and antivirus kind of fight going on. So the way we have the leverage of technology, new technologies, be it of artificial intelligence, machine learning, or all that buzzword we are talking, fraudsters are also getting very smart. They are using different techniques. They are kind of using all the automation tools in hand. So what we are doing at our level is within our company is we are building our fraud solution for the future, and we are imbibing all the new artificial intelligence technique. Those are there where there would be some smart patterns, smart rules in between, and the fraud solution would be more automatic rather than manual based. And that way I think we gonna kind of fight this menace that is kind of hurting the international telecom business since last 20 years. Yeah. Next. So these are our key clients.
Few clientele, I think.
Yeah. And the client base is from all our telecom services, be it for fintech, be it for billing solution, be it for other stuff that we go do for revenue assurance, fraud management, and all stuff. Over to you, Aayush.
Yes, so Eric, this was about what we think from our perspective, how the fraud market looks like and how we are fighting it along with our set of operators, and would like to alert our friends around to create a community, some kind of more strong bonding towards addressing the fraud issues. That's all from our side.
Okay, thank you, Aayush, and thank you, Chandra, for a very inspiring keynote presentation. So thank you both for it very much. One question from my side. What are you actually? What differentiates you actually from let's say other platform providers? Well, where's Bankai Group so unique in? How can you support? Let's say in fintech, with the operators on the wholesale side, and so how can you support them?
Yeah, see, there are two things to it. Like by our DNA, we are a technology company. Like from last 30 years, we have evolved our product range, starting from telecom billing to fintech to fraud management. And the second is being one of the biggest wholesale carrier in the world. Our DNA is of international business. We understand what is day to day, how the carriers are been affecting that, and with that kind of network, more than 140 plus operators on board and 2,500 plus carriers working, the information that we get through our network on wholesale side or carrier business side is very vital. Maybe other technology provider, they may be good with the technology, we are equally good, but the real-time information that we have along with our technology acumen make us different than most of the technology providers those are there in market. So that is our USP, I think. Carrier services plus technology, the mix of both makes us an ideal candidate for any operator who is suffering from fraud.
Cool, thank you very much. And with those wise words, I would like to bridge this actually into a panel discussion. So again, Aayush and Chandra, thank you very much, in the Bankai Group for for this presentation and sharing your knowledge with us here around the table virtually and actually around the globe. So having said that, I would like to invite our other two panelists actually to the stage, which is Davud and Igor. So maybe Davud and Igor, you want to take, let's say, a quick minute to introduce yourself, say something about your company, and then we'll move on. So Davud, maybe you want to start first?
Sure. So excuse me, everyone, my voice is a little bit creaky this morning or this afternoon. So my name is Daud Galini. I am the CEO of Zariat. We provide secure IoT connectivity globally. So one of the things that the guys didn't cover is the area of IoT within the carrier business. So I can add a little bit of exposure there.
Okay, thank you very much, Davud, and happy to have you on the session. Thank you so much. Igor, I think we go to Russia, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. I'm currently in Moscow, a bit of a business trip, but that doesn't sway away from the nice discussion that we're having here. My name is Igor Skutsinya. I work for Telecom. We are transit operator in voice and SMS, and obviously we're venturing in fintech, in fraud management, and in RCS. Obviously, we're adding products, especially in fraud management, and we're very proud of that. Just like our colleagues from Bankai Group, they have a lot of ventures that they explore, and they try to bring new products and satisfy newest needs of their customers, current and new. We are doing our part as well. So we're doing our best to stay at the edge of the technology.
Thank you, Igor, and you as well. Welcome and happy to have you here with us. Now, gentlemen, we are discussing already since almost half an hour and listening to the Bankai Group for how the operators face the threat of the fraud in the wholesale market. So, Igor, if I may stay with you, which fraud scenarios are becoming popular nowadays? Can you tip a little bit on this one?
Well, yes. The thing is, it very much differs geographically. Some countries and some regions, they have some prominent scenarios of fraud, and the others would have totally different. Interconnect bypass is very, very plaguing the Africa and Latin America, while obviously one-geary is a huge problem, and robocalls is a huge problem for North America. So it depends, and it makes vendors of solutions and partners to be agile, to be ready for different challenges in different regions. And this is why actually the market needs companies like Bankai Group and us that have expertise worldwide. We can address the issues that are peculiar for some particular region, and not to single out and not to be helpless in some other region. So I would say, well, interconnect bypass and robocalls are the things that we hear a lot about when we talk to partners. So I would single out those two.
Okay, thank you. Davud, from an IoT perspective, what do you see?
Well, I think it was kind of interesting, the scope of what the guys were discussing already. So all the frauds that were mentioned there, it's all stuff that we know of. It's in the past, let's say. So we now have technology based on what our learnings have been for the past 10, 20 years. But when you look at IoT, it's very new, like in terms of telecoms and wholesale. So what types of frauds are occurring within IoT? Well, the reality is we haven't mentioned it here because nobody knows exactly what those frauds are yet. But just to give you an idea of the types of things that are going to emerge, a lot of, or most of the IoT devices that are out there are actually roaming devices, okay? Or sorry, their connectivity is based on roaming agreements. So a lot of those roaming agreements cover people traveling rather than IoT devices, okay? So there's a huge amount of traffic out there on the wholesale side that's really just IoT operating under personal type of commercial plans. So how do we identify those devices that are actually IoT and differentiate them from what is just a normal person traveling. So, and ultimately, like, it's very, very difficult, you know, to identify that. However, you know, it's something that needs to be addressed. And one of the things that operators are very slow to address, they don't want to disconnect what could be a genuine person roaming. So, you know, and ultimately, you know, we need people like Bankai to be able to develop new systems to identify those new types of frauds that exist there, forced to cover something like IoT. But, you know, it is very new. So maybe the guys might be able to share with us what they are looking at in that area as it grows.
Aayush, Chandra?
Yeah, I think just to add on that, like major frauds you see are like interconnect bypass, Vangry, PBX hacking. Those are, you know, you keep on hearing these words in different fraud management discussions. But the way our friend from Jeriot mentioned about IoT, like what I feel is once eSIM would be there, like eSIM is already growing that, and the future of roaming would be eSIM. Then I think on IoT side also, like companies, those have roaming agreements and those are into international business. That side of fraud, that side of the business will also kind of taken care. And eSIM right now is at very nascent stage, but in next 3-5 years, there would be growth and there would be more fraud on that particular as well. So with international frauds that we have already covered, IoT is going to be one of the biggest area where fraudster can penetrate, because when you talk about IoT, you talk about billions of devices and all devices are vulnerable, and security needs to be very tightened with that. And when you have your information associated with your, you know, Apple Watch, and when you have your all the, you know, banking, and then with a single, you know, login access, anybody can get the access of your all financial or your location or your personal information. So IoT area would be a big, you know, area like in coming years. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, Aayush, on the commercial side, what is the commercial relevance of fraud-related traffic in the wholesale industry? Can you enlighten the people out there?
You know, during my presentation, I covered like 2/3 of the international frauds, you know, are based on the international business, and again, based on voice. SMS, you know, it's still growing. There are different methods being, in terms of frauds happening. Those are being, you know, churned out. Yeah. You know, the what Chandra mentioned about the IFRS frauds, those are in 2019, I believe, 5 billion plus in you know, which is huge number out of our industries. I mean, the biggest of the carriers or operators, you know, their revenues don't even come close to 1/5 of you know, the amount of fraud that is happening. So important is, you know, the commercial relevance is we really need to, you know, get closed as an industry in terms of fighting these things together, apart from the modern techniques or technologies that Lank or Bankai or anybody else is, you know, coming up with. And certain destinations, I mean, you know it when you know, you're getting traffic from certain destinations like the Pacific Islands and all those places. Certain countries in Africa have picked up in a big way in the last few years. So being careful on these things can, you know, bring down this number substantially. And you know, if Igor or myself or Chandra would learn that, okay, there's $2 billion of traffic available tomorrow, which is clean and pure, it will be the happiest days of our life in terms of our voice or carrier business or SMS business. So I think the onus is on all of us, apart from the technologies and everything that we're talking, in order to, you know, bring back the lost revenues. So that's my take on it.
Aayush, I want to stay with you because what you just mentioned. So what pops up is immediately that I mean, in times where the margin and revenues are under actually massive pressure, many market players and even some operators continue showing, let's say, flexibility slash supporting gray areas of the business.
True.
So how's that possible then?
Again, my first line on my presentation that operators are considering fraud as cost of business. It is treated on your balance sheet as the same way as they do account for bad debts. You know, there's a column for bad debts, which is provisional and which is taken in the budget. Now operators are considering many of them that I know of are considering fraud as a cost of doing business. So that makes it a little lighter for them. The sales team, like you said, there's a lot of pressure of margin revenues. You know, every day you see new companies, not only on the carrier side, but operators also, they get taking different kind of licenses, MVNOs. So there is a multiple, channel through which these people or the fraudsters can penetrate. So the sales team, I wouldn't blame anyone, but I've been managing sales for the last 15 years. So the KPIs are so hard that once, and especially in the operator side, I've seen this with friends, that the pressure is so high in terms of achieving the numbers. So, you just let it bypass. So these things are, killing it rather than growing. I mean, all of us are seeing growth, Blank, ourselves, a lot of our industry, other friends are seeing the growth, but somewhere it is being diluted. So, flexibility is in this manner, and which is not right.
I understand, but I would call it a boomerang, because but the boomerang will come back and will be bigger if it comes back. And but yeah, okay, cool. So Dawood, how can we combat it? What's the best way?
Well, I think one of the things that we really need to cover is the human element, and so much is talked about just in terms of technology, like what technology solution do you have for this? And everyone assumes that technology is the solution, but the reality is it really needs a blended approach. It needs a consultative element to any solution that's technology that's being implemented. Because from what I have seen in my experience is ultimately there is always going to be someone, a person, a human being that has the potential to create fraud and knows how to bypass the system. So in order for us to be able to combat that specific element, we need to take a more forensic and consultative approach applied with technology to know when that's actually occurring and know how to approach that with your client organization, because a lot of those clients don't really want to admit that there's a human element within their organization that is actually causing that. And it's very interesting when you enter a client and they're saying that, like, there's fraud, and you have to be very, very sensitive in terms of how you approach it, because
I can imagine. Yes, I can imagine.
Liability, getting threat, is the person you're talking to, the source of that. So I think it's something that needs to be escalated a lot more. And I think that, when you look at the people who are actually doing the audits, like the accounting firms, etc., their approach will be something along the lines of, well, is there a technology solution for it as well? So I think that, more of it needs to be blended in terms of, how can the technology companies like Bankai, etc., provide that consulting element to approach that human risk that causes that fraud.
Okay, Igor, you want to add something to it? How to combat it?
Yes, of course. I think that just like the law enforcement faces crime, and obviously there is no shortage of that. The thing is, the technology must serve the detection purpose, and just to be sure that the punishment is there. And what actually is the best tool against crime is actually to detect it as good as you may, and to actually pursue it and just make sure that there are consequences. And it's the same thing with our fraudsters that we deal with. The technology is every day improving and is doing a better and better and better job in detecting fraud and actually combating it. We know more, and the principle is to make it faster than the fraudsters do, and I think a lot of companies out there are doing a good job on that, and they're really outpacing the fraudsters' efforts and their creative minds, I would say.
Okay, thank you. So Aayush, you mentioned before partnerships. You know, people working together, operators working together to fight it, to combat it, to you know, to regulate maybe a couple of things here and there, speak the same language, and do what by the end of the day is best for a whole industry. First of all, is that the only way that for instance operators and carriers can or the wholesale industry can protect itself actually, or are there also other challenges which we also need to face and need to tackle?
No, so you know, like Deod said, that it's not you know, we need to make sure the processes are standardized. Again, information sharing and all those things is one part of it, but processes internally need to be well defined. The companies who are going ahead with technology to carriers and operators need to adopt a more consultative approach, because when you're installing a system, you have an experience of it. The user needs to not just be trained on how to use the system, but why and when to implement certain things. So those kind of activities, because fraud management is not something which is sell by the box kind of a solution. It requires a more consultative approach towards it. From the industry perspective, one thing means I feel that the customer due diligence is not very strong overall. When I say it's not specifically, but the customer due diligence takes a lot of you know, a lot of pressure off you when you do it in the right way, and saves you or anybody out of a lot of fraud that may happen with them. So that is one area I think is very important in choosing who the customer is for an operator and a carrier today, which will help us in clearing all of this out as a main aspect that I see beyond something.
The wood?
Yeah, I just want to touch on something that you did mention briefly back there, Eric, and that was the regulatory effect. Okay, so I feel that on a global basis, regulators both enable and prevent fraud from occurring. You know, when we look at those extraneous factors, because ultimately what the regulator says, the telco has to apply to, okay? So, you know, that in some countries allows fraud to occur, okay? So what that means is that you have a regulatory environment that enables the fraud, and then on the reverse side, you also have a regulatory environment that prevents the fraud management, such as, you know, being able to block messages or block calls or inspect content of SMS, etc. So it's funny how, you know, we haven't dealt with that specifically in terms of, you know, world regulatory environment to mitigate a lot of the issues that we're having with fraud, as I said, from both the supply side and from the prevention side as well.
Okay, thank you. No, and especially what you mentioned. I mean, even in some countries, and I know at least one or two in Latin America, is that you know, you cannot close down a SIM farm. You cannot close down a SIM farm, and this sounds actually a little bit stupid to all of us. Like, hey guys, so what's else? Even though that the regulatory might have, let's say, good governmental laws behind it to you know, to
correct, and it's so obvious, and you know, you outline that case and they're like, well, it's the law, and you're like, so the law allows fraud now, so you know, what do we do?
No, exactly. So to have, let's say, one line, one train, one you know, one track, that would absolutely help. So thank you. Igor, you want to jump in?
I just wanted to maybe add that, yes, I mean, in some countries, the legislation wouldn't be kind of directly helping us fight fraud, but that what makes us wonderful. Not like wonderful, but this is something you have to work around. You have to be creative, and you have to find some methods that wouldn't hurt the cause when you're achieving your goals. I mean, we won't be allowing like any party involved in this process too much power, and perhaps the regulators are being out there just to make sure that there's no other restrictions that they can put on business on any cause. So this is something we could work around with, and this is somewhere where we can bring a better technology that is within the legislation but still working as effectively as the old technology with a better regulation. I would say this is kind of a stimulus, and this is what makes the technically advanced solutions better than the ones in the past. It's because they can fit better. So.
Okay, cool. Wood, you mentioned, or in the way you did mention it, about we can have whatever fantastic protecting platforms, right? So let's say, for instance, firewalls, so, and I do tend to agree with you that managing the firewall is more important, so from a resource point of view and the way you do it, than just having the box, because the box is doing something, but the people managing it is very important. So Chandra, for you, to start off with, or to kick off with, what is the contribution of security vendors, or platform vendors, such as for instance firewall providers?
Yeah, Eric, just to add on to what our friends were talking about global regulation, actually in ideal world, there has to be a body like UN for telecom operators. But we are in a very real world, so we need to kind of work whatever conditions we are into. So what I still, just to add on to that, what I feel is somewhere fraud needs to come up in those board meetings when these big telco have their annual general meetings. They talk about their growth plans, they talk about their investment diversification, this and that, but they never talk about telecom fraud, or they never talk about fraud, how with so much digitalization, customers are so vulnerable. And the worst part is it's the telecom operator whose brands take a hit. Like if you see the global all McKinsey reports or all that, one fraud, if you lose a single telecom customer, you lose and you lose 30 months of 30 months of life cycle of that customer. So that's the cost of losing one customer if you lose that by customer. Okay, now coming to your question regarding firewall. See, firewalls are generally for messaging or all that. Messaging is that area, specifically A2P messaging, that's been growing leaps and bounds in last 5-7 years, and will keep on growing for the next 5-7 years. And when we talk about messaging, generally we assume that it's very secure or very up-to-date kind of media by which we communicate. But if you see, still 45% of messages being terminated by gray routes. Okay, and when you when you bring IoT into the picture, when you bring two-way factor authorization, where you can access anybody identity or anybody financial financial information through one SMS, messaging becomes more prone to fraudster than typical voice. So the purview of A2P messaging when it comes to fraud is much bigger than voice, and it will be much bigger in coming years. So firewall vendors have great responsibility to protect these subscriber. Those are kind of using digital money, mobile money, or using all those value-added services. And the best part is, of course, firewall vendors protects the operators revenue, through blockage of gray termination. Second, it gives the control over their network. Like if you have firewall, that operator has control over their network. And with IoT and all those services coming, and messaging would be the ideal way for communication between the machines. So firewall vendors have great role to play. They are already playing, and in coming days, with the whole bandwidth of messaging, their role would be much more important for the industry. Yeah.
Igor, your view on this?
Oh, excuse me. I would say that the firewalls are obviously important as a not just like as a standalone thing, but also like the part of your complete defense. Like a medieval knight, you're supposed to be protected from head to toes. And obviously, firewall being a great addition to the analytical platforms that you might have, the test call generators that you might have. Maybe you have like a validation system going on, like stir shaken or A/B handshake, and all those things that they add up and make your defense better. So we cannot single out a one tool, but we cannot undermine the value that each kind of fraud management tool is bringing. So yeah.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add in there,
please.
Eric, when we're covering off something like firewalls. So, I mean, SMS firewalls are one aspect, but we still have SS7 firewalls, SIP firewalls, GTP firewalls, diameter firewalls. And I suppose if you look at it from that point of view, Igor did mention analytical systems, etc. So those are systems that have the ability to detect when the fraud occurs. But what you actually need is a firewall to prevent it when it occurs, because it's the firewall that stops it. It's pointless, detecting something. The event has occurred in the past, okay? The revenue is lost. So what you need in actual fact is a SMS firewall, SIP firewall, SS7 firewall, diameter firewall, GTP firewall, to detect and prevent them in real time so that you just don't have any of that revenue loss, if that kind of makes sense.
So where do I find the golden egg then? Because that's the question.
The $1 million answer.
I would love to hear the $1 million answer.
Well, I mean, ultimately, there are companies out there that have the unified signaling firewall that would, analyze all of those protocols all in one box, so they do exist. I suppose from an investment point of view, a lot of operators might be a little bit behind the curve in terms of, investing in those technologies. They may not understand that how those firewalls actually work. Is it too risky to implement an additional node within the network? It ain't broke, don't fix it kind of approach. So there's a lot of lethargy, lack of education, understanding. I think it was Aayush that mentioned it, in his very first slide. The tier ones are just very, very slow. And what can you do about that? So ultimately they're always going to be behind the curve because fraudsters are smarter than us. There's too much money at stake.
Absolutely, but Aayush and Chandra, they were mentioning twice actually the numbers, the billions of dollars which are out there, and I even read market analysis where it goes up to 17 billion a year of fraud. And that's what I'm trying to get out of you guys. I mean, it is time. We're far past the time of a wake-up call for the operators. And yes, Aayush, I do understand absolutely that being a bit flexible and it looks a bit nicer on my balance sheet, whatever. But again, from my point of view, it is a boomerang which will hit us. On the other hand, as the Wood said, all the unified signaling firewall guys are saying, hello, fine, fantastic. On the other hand, the demand will be there, but it's just coming too slow towards us, which by the end of the day is not helping our business case. So partnering up to do it, please join in.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, I can't remember whether it was Aayush or Chanderhas that mentioned it. That operators are budgeting for fraud. Like there's a line item in your budget. This is a percentage that we feel is acceptable for fraud. I don't accept it. That figure should be zero. It ultimately should be zero. Okay, and that should be the acceptable figure. And then people should be held to account if it's above zero. And until that happens, we're going to stay in this situation.
That line should not even be on the balance sheet. Anyway.
But I mean,
it's
I'm
a P&L
not making
item,
this
not a
up.
balance sheet item.
It is, I'm not making this up. This comes up every time when I'm discussing.
Yeah, you're right.
With an operator. And just 1 second, how do they evaluate this? If they've accounted, let's say $100 on this line item on their annual budget, and let's say the technology with which we are going, and I think Igor would agree, is $102, they would say, no, I've accounted 100 for this. If your system is under $100, I would buy it. If not, we've already accounted for 100. So you're charging 102, sorry. I'm okay with the $100 fraud. So, I mean, I have seen this multiple cases.
No, and I imagine, and I know you traveled around the world extensively, and especially in Africa. So you have bumped into many examples, as you just mentioned, which I understand. But by the end of the day, also, I mean, all the operators should see, and even if they're slow. I mean, I worked for 11 years for one of the biggest operators in the world. And for many other big ones, and yes, sometimes they're a bit slow, but they do understand and they know what's happening there. It's just that the process, again, we come back to resources, we come back to the human factor of it, and on the positive or on the negative side. So I think it remains something to keep on fighting. And guys, I thank you so much for your insight and sharing this with the globe, actually. So Igor, if I may ask you sort of the last question, and then I'll do the round to everybody. The outlook for the, let's say, near future. What's out there? What's there to expect? And what can we expect from you?
I'd be happy to share. And my answer would involve kind of an answer to the comment that Dawood made earlier about the fraudsters being smarter than us. I would say that they are not smarter. It's just that, I mean, they're a standout case, which is easier to see. And even if in some cases they appear smarter, the businesses that work legally and do great business, they have more firepower. They have more tools, and they have a lot, more strength. So I would say that the future looks real good, because the fraudsters don't have the budgets that the operators have. They don't have the budgets that vendors have. And I think that the technology, the perfection of technology that is going on would just make sure that the fraudsters would have a very, very hard life. I mean, maybe we cannot eradicate that in the nearest future or even the near future. But the thing is that we have all the tools to make it possible, especially like when we have developed our latest anti-fraud tool, the AB Handshake, which is basically a validation tool that checks the call details between two operators directly. I mean, the fraudsters definitely didn't account for that. They didn't know that it was coming. So, and I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of tools that are, that they have this idea of denying fraud, of just making sure that the operators that pursue doing clean business, good business, fraud-free business, they have the tools and they have the perspective to make it possible. So I'm very optimistic about it.
Thank you so much, Igor. Chander, tell us, what's your outlook for the near future? How do you see it?
Yeah, I will a bit differ than Igor, because see, yes, we will have better tools and fraudster will have a hard time. But when you see the amount of digitalization is happening with 5G rollouts and with IoT in place, the vulnerability of the networks would be 10 or 100 times than what is today. So yes, we will have more tools in hand with artificial intelligence tool, machine learning. but fraudster ground to do fraud is increasing by at least 100 times in next 5 years, when eSIM would be there, when IoT would be there. So what I feel is this is the time where telecom operator role in whole digitalization cycle is going to increase manifold, because till now what operators are doing in most of the cases, they are just a pipe supplier. They are just giving the connectivity. With content coming into the picture, with the operator mobile money into the picture, where many operators already are, mobile money banks or payment banks. So what I feel is they need to be more cautious. They need to make fraud into their strategic business meetings. There has to be strategic goals on fraud side. Coming to Bankai as a company, like we have our own mobile money solution apart from telco or all that, and we already have we are getting into smart city or all those new edge cutting edge technologies. We are developing or taking our fraud management solution and keeping in mind that what would be the fraud scenarios after 5 to 7 years. So with fraudster evolving, with technology evolving, we are already trying to be 2-3 years ahead than the curve. So that's what initiative we are taking in our company.
Perfect, thank you, and that's something to be proud of. Dawood,
Yeah.
some famous last words from your side, how you see the future, what's out there, and whatever thoughts.
I don't know whether they'd be famous last words, but just to touch on something Chandra has mentioned already, looking for a UN body type body. Well, we kind of already do with the GSMA and maybe the IATF as well. So it's not like we don't have those bodies. They do exist. The problem is they're relatively toothless, okay? I suppose what I would see is that, and talking more on a practical level of the way in which it should be approached, it really should be the regulators. It should be the national regulators, that play a part here in making something like firewalls absolutely, totally, and utterly mandatory. And the reason is not simply for prevention, but it's also for enablement. Because if you have a firewall in place, a properly functioning firewall, it will also prevent the fraud from occurring, as well as, prevent the fraud from being initiated, as well as from being received on the other side as well. So, I think if on a global level we are able to, ensure that all operators implemented standards-based firewalls, and ultimately it's some of the most simple things that need to be done to prevent all of that happening, that this is where we are. But in terms of, as I said, a practical measure, it's probably the easiest thing that could be done to prevent a lot of it. Maybe not 100%, but let's take it up to 95, and that's a pretty good, place to be.
Thank you, Dawood. Aayush, floor is yours.
Yes, sir. I tend to agree with most of them. They've covered most of the points, as a closing note. But there needs to be some kind of a body that we all agree, which is more closer. Like Dawood said, we've got GSMA, we've got ITFS, we've got smaller communities like MEF, GLF, all those people coming up. But there needs to be more tight intimacy between the operators. Second, I'm not saying that fraud, can be curbed 100% at one point, because there's new technology coming up, there's new ways of communication coming up, there's IoT is growing, everything is growing. So obviously fraud is inevitable. But as we're seeing the graphs rising, like you said, 17 billion, I have, a number of 28 billion back in 2018. So that number needs to, be brought down somehow. And one more thing which just struck while all of us were talking, and my final word is, like Dawood said, that everybody needs to put in a firewall, and from the operator side, there needs to be some standardization. Likewise, on a fraud management solution or a firewall solution, there needs to be a standard body which has set of, standardization rules, and whichever, product is following that community keeps on giving inputs. Whoever innovates first in terms of how to technically do it, sells more. Selling is a different thing. Today, Igor and me may be competing somewhere in terms of our technology or voice elsewhere. But when it comes to a standard product, everybody has different ways of selling it. Rather, in this particular fraud management kind of a situation, one regulator, one approving authority across globe, which has all the updates, and if the platform has all those tick marks, then it is eligible to sell like a standardization mark. So that is my final take and what I have learned from all you guys today while talking. So something like that would help, but again, it is inevitable to 100% cut it off. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aayush. And today, ladies and gentlemen, because it seems that we are heading towards the end of the session, and before thanking my fellow panelists, we were talking about how do operators face the threat of fraud in the wholesale industry. And my special thanks goes, of course, to the sponsor, the Bankai Group, and Aayush and Chander. Thank you very much for your insight. Very inspirational presentation you gave us. And I want to thank, of course, for your participation, and to the rest of my panelists. So the Wood, always a pleasure. Igor, cool as always. So thank you very much for being here. And for me, guys, it's ciao for now. See you next time, and stay tuned with Care Community. And Bankai Group, thank you again. And now I give back the microphone to my colleague Laura in the studio in Berlin. And see you hopefully very soon, guys.
Thank you, Eric. Dear all, we're at the end of this webinar session, and I would like to thank our keynote speakers, Aayush and Chanderhas, for the interesting presentations, and our panelists for joining and sharing their knowledge. Also, thank you to our audience for participating and listening. This panel will be soon available to watch on our CC Media portal. We are looking forward to welcoming you all in our both physical and virtual events this year. For more information, please visit our events portal. This panel will be soon available to watch on CC Media portal. Also, for all updates and fresh content, follow us on our 4 social media channels. Also subscribe to Telegram channel for exclusive invitations to our CC webinar sessions. And goodbye for now. Take care.